What's good, guys? It's Dimmy M7. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It might be raining in your city right now. After you do those things, it might get really sunny. Gilbert Arenas, Agent Zero himself, the man with some of the dumbest takes I've ever heard. If you're a fan of the NBA and you typically go on Twitter or online often, chances are you've probably seen at least one of Gilbert's takes over the years that just makes you scratch your head and wonder, what is this guy thinking? You ever hear people say, well, if you haven't played the sport, you don't know more about the sport than the guy who actually did play the sport? Gilbert Arenas is the prime example that just because you played the sport doesn't mean you know more about that sport than someone who hasn't played it. Although there are plenty of examples of Gilbert just saying absolutely absurd takes, this is the one that I want to talk about.
But to be real, how many teams have won without generational talent?
Steph is not a generational talent.
Detroit.
Steph Curry's.
Steph is not a generational.
Steph not a generational.
You know what a generational? Wemby is a generational person. That is a generational talent.
Steph became
a great generational means you can't mimic it. You can't mimic. You can't mimic
at number one.
Well, you said you can't. Can you mimic Magic Johnson, 6'9" point guard with the vision? No. You can't mimic Shaquille O'Neal's body.
Kareem
you can't mimic fucking LeBron James. Those you can't mimic Wemby. Those are generational.
I agree.
It only comes once every. Right.
So
there's only 5 or 6.
Skill is based on like physical
traits.
Okay.
Physical traits is generational. Like somebody like Giannis is tweaking. Right, like Jokic is not a generational talent.
No.
He's just a great basketball player.
Yeah.
Curry was a great basketball player.
Stephen Curry is not a generational talent. I'm sorry, are we actually serious right now? Now, look, in the clip, he's basically talking about the physical attributes, like how Victor Wembanyama is a 7'4", 7'5" player that can move and shoot and do all these things that a much smaller player can do. Or someone like LeBron James, the physical specimen that he is and has always been, that we'll never really see anything else like that. Essentially, what he's doing is that he is equating generational talent to a generational physicality, a generational physical talent. But the problem with that is that that can't be the only outlier to a generational talent. Because sure, Steph Curry isn't the tallest or fastest player we've ever seen. However, he's the greatest shooter that we have ever seen touch a basketball. Last time I checked, shooting is a talent. The ability to shoot the basketball is a talent. And yeah, okay, it's a skill too, don't get me wrong, but let's just be honest, Steph has a talent for it. That alone, by definition, makes Steph Curry a generational talent. By Gilbert's logic, Kyrie Irving isn't a generational talent, apparently. Because Kyrie Irving is like, what, 6'2", 6'3"? You know, he's not the fastest. He's not the most athletically gifted. He doesn't, like, jump out the gym or anything like that. But Kyrie Irving has the greatest handle in the history of the NBA, in the history of basketball. One of the greatest finishers under the rim in NBA history. One of the greatest shot makers in NBA history. He's often referred to as one of, if not the most skilled player in the NBA ever. So is Kyrie Irving not a generational talent? That's my problem with this entire argument here. He is making the argument of generational talent exclusively relating to physical ability. But in reality, being a generational talent is so much more than what you can do physically or what you are physically. It's about your skill set, how you use those skills in conjunction with your physical ability. Bring it back to Steph Curry. Not only is he the greatest shooter that we have ever seen in our lives, he also has a very nasty handle. And on top of all of that, Gilbert says in that video that a generational talent is something that can't be replicated, which, okay, let's go along with that. Let's just say that it can't be replicated to be a generational talent. Who's replicating Steph Curry? Now, let's be very clear here. We've seen players try to replicate Steph Curry. We've seen players try to play like Steph. And sure, although some players are closer to that than others, no one's really been like Steph, have they? You've got players that are similar, like a Damian Lillard kind of thing, a Trae Young. But if you're one of those people that actually believe that we are going to see a Steph Curry 2.0 at some point in the near future, you are lying to yourself. Because sure, we're going to see a lot of players that are like Steph Curry, that can play like Steph Curry. But we are not going to see a player play just as well, if not exceeding Steph Curry, in a very long time, because he is a generational talent. Now, maybe he wasn't born that way. Maybe he wasn't born this incredible legend that we see today, but he has worked his way to that point using his skills and making his skills his talent. Like I said, this argument right here makes absolutely no sense to me. He's basically trying to box up this term into one singular thing when it's just not that. In order to be considered a generational talent, there has to be multiple factors into the equation, and he's just excluding most of them. But again, this is coming from Gilbert Arenas, not just a guy that gives out hot takes, he gives out hot garbage takes. But hey, that's just my opinion in the whole thing. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And until next time, guys, peace.